Welcome to another episode of the Freedom Field Life. Today we're in Marshall County, Alabama. We're going to center this episode around Guntersville area. There's a lot happened in the Guntersville area, so I'm sure you'll find this all interesting. This marker in Marshall County is for Major Paramore's federal bombardment of Guntersville. The hill to the immediately left was the site of the 1862 shelling of Guntersville during the war between the states. On July 28, 1862, a federal force under the command of Major J.W. Paramore placed 2 Parrott guns on the hill and shelled Guntersville from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Captain Cyrus Loomis's 1st Michigan Battery carried out the shelling, which sent more than 100 of Guntersville's women and children to the large ravine south of town for protection. The rifled Parrott guns fired 6-pound projectiles greater distances than older smoothbore cannons and enabled the Yankees to reach across the Tennessee River. Trenches had to be dug to steady the Parrott guns, as they can still be seen on top of the hill. Most of the shelling concentrated on cotton warehouses and boat construction facilities south of Henry Island, now inundated. The Federals attempted to send an attack force across the river but failed. As a result of the bombardment, a number of homes near the riverbank were burned, and many other homes suffered damage from the shells, including the Nichols and Gilbreath residences. Fortunately, both of these houses still stand today. The Chattanooga Daily Rebel reported that the shelling resulted in only 2 deaths. One was the wife of Militia General Samuel King Rayburn. And this is kind of in a little park here, and there is a trail that leads up to apparently where the Civil War cannon pit is located. I'm not going to walk up the trail. Apparently there's a cemetery up there as well. We're here in Guntersville in Marshall County, and this is the history of Guntersville. This area's proximity to the Tennessee River and Indian trails made it a crossroads for early habitation, settlement, and trade. Archaeological studies reveal that it was first inhabited about 12,000 years ago by the Paleo-Indians. They were followed by various tribes of Native Americans. The Cherokees arrived in the late 1700s and called the area Kusa Nunahi, meaning creek path. In 1785, John Gunter became the first white man to settle here. He married the daughter of the local Cherokee chief. He was given land here and raised a large family. Will Rogers is his great-grandson. Gunter and his wife died in 1835 and are buried near their home site. General Andrew Jackson came through the area in October 1813 and recruited several Cherokees to help him fight the Creek Indians at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. John Gunter's son, Edward, established a ferry here in 1818. As the small village grew, it became known as Gunter's Landing. Gunter's Landing was involved in the tragic removal of Indians during the late 1830s. The John Binge detachment of more than 1,000 Cherokees crossed the river in Guntersville in early October 1838 on their way to the Oklahoma Territory in what has become known as the Trail of Tears. John Allan Wyeth, the town's most famous citizen, was born in a log cabin near here in 1845 and later became president of the American Medical Association. Guntersville was practically destroyed during the Civil War by Union raids and cannon bombardments. One building to survive is the Colonel Montgomery Gilbreath home, which still exists. By the 1890s, the town had become a major port for commercial and passenger steamboats traveling between Knoxville and Decatur. The area was forever changed in 1939 when the TVA constructed Guntersville Dam a few miles south and created Lake Guntersville. Here in Marshall County is a plaque that's for the federal troops burned Guntersville during the Civil War. January 15, 1865 was perhaps the darkest day in the history of Guntersville. At noon, 40 federal Marines from the gunboat USS General Grant were sent to burn the town. After the mission was completed, only 7 buildings remained standing: the Marshall County Courthouse, the city jail, the Guntersville Hotel, a schoolhouse, the Masonic Hall, and 2 residences. Miraculously, both residences still exist: the Gilbreath House and the on Blount Avenue, and the Nichols House on Hill Avenue. The mission to burn the town resulted from an incident at nearby Red Hill, a small community south of Guntersville. During a surprise early morning federal raid by Colonel William J. Palmer's 15th Pennsylvania Cavalry on General Highland Lyon's Kentucky Cavalry, one of the Colonel Palmer's men was killed. The soldier was Sergeant Arthur P. Lyon, no relation to General Lyon, a favorite of the Federal Cavalry and recent recipient of the Medal of Honor. This action caused immediately retaliation by the federal troops, who burned several plantations as they advanced up Browns Valley toward the Tennessee River. Among the plantations destroyed were those of Arthur Campbell Beard and Thomas Atkins Street. The plantation belonging to Dr. J.W. Fennell was spared by the Federals, who used the house to treat their wounded. The Grant, which was positioned nearby, then navigated upriver to Guntersville, where the Marines were dispatched to burn the town. The gunboat's log noted that it landed at Guntersville at noon, sent out a landing party, and burned the town. It also recorded that the weather was clear and pleasant, and that by 3:50 p.m., the burning of Guntersville had been completed. The Grant then cast loose and headed down the Tennessee River. Guntersville began to resurrect itself from the destruction of 4 years of war with the help of Lewis Wyeth. In the summer of 1865, he traveled to Nashville, Louisville, and Cincinnati to solicit food and aid for the starving citizens of Guntersville. Effects of the Civil War lasted well into the 20th century. As late as 1935, there were 43 widows of Confederate veterans drawing pensions who were living in Marshall County. The last Confederate veteran to die in Marshall County was John L. Cox, who died in 1944. Then this is kind of a nice little area. It's where the history of Guntersville is located. But on the other side, it says, buried near here in 1835 was John Gunter, founder of Guntersville. He and his wife, Catherine, daughter of a Cherokee Indian chief, were the great-grandparents of Will Rogers, beloved American humorist. This is the Colonel Montgomery Gilbreath house. Montgomery Gilbreath had this board and batten house constructed prior to the beginning of the Civil War. Its design is probably based on one of the published house plans of famed landscape gardener and architect A.J. Downing, 1815 to 1852, of Newburgh, New York. Colonel Gilbreath was elected probate judge of Marshall County in 1850 and served until 1862. He then joined the Confederacy, attaining the rank of lieutenant colonel with the 49th Alabama Infantry. When the Yankees invaded Guntersville in 1865 and began to burn it, several leading men of the town, including Colonel Gilbreath, met with the federal officers and pleaded with them to spare their city. Because of their intervention, and perhaps because Colonel Gilbreath was a Mason, as was the commander of the federal forces, this house was among only 7 buildings spared. The house did sustain slight damage from a Yankee cannonball that was fired from a bluff north of the river. Colonel Gilbreath was active in various business and political affairs in the town. In 1857, he was a trustee of the proposed Tennessee and Coosa Railroad and was elected as a delegate to the 1875 State Constitution Convention. Colonel Gilbreath was born in 1814 in East Tennessee and married Tempe Jane Kilfoyle in 1844. They had 10 children: Mary, Sally, Emmett, Edwin, Gordon, Catherine, Alexander, Albert, Sidney, John, and Montgomery Jr. Colonel Gilbreath died October 8, 1885, and his wife died January 9, 1898. Both were buried in City Cemetery. Several descendants of the Gilbreaths still reside in the area. The Guntersville Historical Society purchased the house in 2001, and in 2003 it was placed on the Alabama Register of Landmarks and Heritage. And then right behind this marker is the house itself. It is a museum that appears to be closed at this time. This area in downtown Guntersville is known as the Errol Allan Park. And here's the marker for that. It says the Errol Allan Park, established in 2003. This park is the result of the support of Errol C. Allan, 1930 to 2013, longtime resident and enthusiastic supporter of Guntersville. The park is located at the site of two historic buildings, one destroyed by fire and the other by water damage. The business owners, Dorothy Wright and Danny Wright of D. Wright's Clothing Store, and Wanda and Jim Poole of Wanda's Restaurant, also supported the project and made the property available. Prior to D. Wright's, the corner building housed other stores including Ratliff's Quality Store, Adams, and W.G. Henry's, before Wanda's became a favorite gathering spot in the next building to the north. This location was home to several drugstores including Rexall, Harrelson Drugs, Pickett Drugs, and Thomason Drugs. Here's a Veterans Memorial on the grounds of the Marshall County Courthouse. Talks about World War I, World War II, veteran of foreign wars, Marshall County, honoring those who served in combat, especially those who made the supreme sacrifice. Coming on around, we see Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, and Iraq. And then this is known as Veterans Corner, 1988, founded by the Marshall County Commission, J. Charles Wright, chairman. This marker is for the Courthouse Well. In 1883, the Marshall County Commissioners hired Nathan Horton, one of the town's black citizens, to dig a public well in the courthouse yard. The resulting 80-foot deep, 5-foot diameter well is directly under this replica of a 19th century well and contains 48 feet of water. The wood shingle roof provides protection for the well and shade for the visitors of the courthouse yard. During droughts, townspeople would draw water freely from this well. Two cisterns dug by the city on courthouse grounds in 1893 provided water for fighting fires and watering livestock, but eventually outlived their usefulness. After the local newspaper called them mosquito hatcheries, city workers filled in the cisterns in 1908. 1 year after city water became available. In 1914, the Women's Christian Temperance Unit raised funds to purchase an ornate metal fountain to quench the thirst of its citizens with water instead of liquor from nearby Booze Row. The fountain was located near the old well but was removed in 1963 during a major renovation of the courthouse. The fountain is now located at the Guntersville Museum, and then directly behind this is their replica of the well. Here's a marker in front of the courthouse in Marshall County. This is events in Marshall County during the war between the states. On July 28th to 29th, Guntersville was shelled and burned by the Union artillery, cavalry, and infantry. The skirmish at ferries at Ferns, Laws, Matthews Landing, and Fort Deposit. The 1st of May of 1862, Sand Mountain Cavalry Battle. 24th of August, 1863, Fort Deposit Gunter's Landing Skirmish. December 27th, 1863, Buck Island Massacre. March 2nd, 1864, Guntersville attacked and captured by Union infantry. March 14th of 1864, Claysville Skirmish. The April 13th, 1864, Guntersville shelled by Union gunboat and attacked by the Union infantry. May 22nd, Town Creek Skirmish. May 26th through 27th of 1864, Union forces moved through Marshall County en route to Atlanta. 25th of October, 1864, General Hood's 38,000 CSA Army camps Brown Valley en route to Tennessee. January 14th, 1865, Beard's Bluff and Fort Deposit Skirmish. Union forces capture CSA cavalry at Red Hill. And then the 15th of January, 1865, Guntersville was burned by Marines from Union gunboats. This marker in front of the Marshall County Courthouse is for faith, strength, hope, and service dedicated to those who lost their lives and to the commitment by the communities in Marshall County to survive and recover from the April 27, 2011 tornado outbreak that produced 15 tornadoes, caused 5 deaths, 47 injuries, and did $30 million in damages. This is a section of core drilled from the limestone bedrock during the construction of Guntersville Dam, 1935 to 1938. This is also in front of the Marshall County Courthouse. It says 1 mile northeast of McKee's Island was the Indian village Tali, visited by DeSoto in 1540. This was erected by the Alabama Society of the Colonial Dames of America, 1937. And then this says it was presented to Marshall County, Guntersville, by South Bank, September of 1985. We're in downtown Guntersville in Marshall County, and this is for Carter Hardware from 1910 to 1940. John H. Carter Sr., along with his brothers Sam and W.H., operated a hardware store here for 30 years. They had the present brick building constructed and opened for business in November of 1910. It continued in operation until 1940. John H. Carter Sr., from 1874 to 1933, was probate judge from 1904 until 1916. When he died, his son, John H. Carter Jr., took over the business. In later years, 4 dime stores were located here, including Yost, Burke's, Weaver's, and the dime store owned by Judge Carter's granddaughter. Other businesses have also occupied the building, including a deli, a nightclub, and in 1989, he became the Marshall County Legislative Office. This marker in Marshall County talks about the ravine used for protection against Yankee shelling. The first major attack on Guntersville during the Civil War occurred on the morning of Monday, July 28, 1862. The Federals had marched by night and had reached a hill on the north side of the Tennessee River, and from this vantage point aimed their cannons at the small town of Guntersville. The Federals, led by Major J.W. Paramore of the 3rd Ohio Cavalry, included a regiment of Union infantry and a section of artillery with 2 6-pounder Parrott guns. At 6 a.m., when the Federals began shelling the town, many of the citizens fled to the deep ravine, which extended from the main street to present-day Blount Avenue. More than 100 women and children huddled here against the slopes of the ravine for 12 hours until the shelling ended at 6 p.m. While considerable damage was inflicted by the shelling, only 2 people were killed. One was Mrs. Evergreen Findlay Rayburn, the wife of Samuel King Rayburn, who was the Confederate general in charge of militia for North Alabama and a later mayor of Guntersville. The shelling incident was reported by John Allan Wyeth's book, With Saber and Scalpel, and the Chattanooga Daily Rebel newspaper. Well, that's another episode of Historical Markers on the Freedom-Filled Life. I hope you learned a lot about the Guntersville area, and we'll see you in the next episode, so like, subscribe,